You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello everyone, Josh Neighbors here today for the Locked On Nationals podcast. Today it is December 20th, 2021, and on today's show I'll give my thoughts on the news of Buck Showalter being named the Mets manager, obviously division rival for the Nats. Talk about that and kind of the mixture of managers that we've got now in the National League East. It's an interesting one, kind of an older one too. And then we'll look at Joe Ross. We'll talk about the year he had. We'll talk about what he could do next year. Avoided a second Tommy John surgery, but did have an elbow injury, keeping him out 2022. We'll see, can he put together another season, and then maybe the Nationals consider him giving him a couple years, giving him a contract. We'll explore that option. Or will the Nationals say no because of inconsistencies and performance and also health? They'll take a pass and kind of we'll speculate on what his 2022 could look like. That coming up on today's show. All right, so the first piece of news that we have to start with, and if this was a busier or more busy time, I would have kind of had this as a note, so we'd touch on it maybe towards the back end, but there's not a whole lot going on right now, and the biggest piece of news that we got from over the weekend was that Buck Showalter will be coming back out of his, I guess you say forced retirement because, he and the Orioles parted ways, but he is back and he is going to manage the New York Mets. So Buck is 65 years old. He has managed, a total of over 3,000 games in his career in Baltimore, in Texas, and in Arizona. And the fact that in Baltimore, he hit a 49% winning percentage in the American League East, against Toronto and New York and Boston and Tampa, all the way up 2018. Very impressive. I think that is very impressive. Won the AL East back in 2014. But yeah, this is a guy who is going to now be, taking control of the Mets. And I like the hire for them because it's somebody who has had the experience, who is somebody that, obviously everybody talks about his scouting knowledge as well too, but he's won the Manager of the Year award in the American League 3 separate times. He's got an over 500 career winning percentage. He's managed those 3,000 games like I talked about. I know he's a bit older, but 65 is not out of the question crazy, right? We've seen Ron Washington out there coaching. Obviously, Tony La Russa is not a spring chicken either. So age-wise, Tony La Russa is 77. So age-wise, Buck Showalter, he is up there. But when you consider all the experience that Buck Showalter has, it makes sense for them because it's been an unstable situation, and this guy is a stable hand. And also, too, I'm going to miss him on MLB Network as one of these weird things. This happens sometimes, too. You get a guy who is a former player or former manager or a coach, and they'll go on TV and do a really good job, and they get plucked away, and you're like, oh, no, I do not like that. I'm going to miss them on television. That's how I felt when John Lynch got let go, or not let go, but he decided to move on from broadcasting to go to be the general manager. I think he's general manager, one of those, whatever titles it is, but go on to be the general manager of the San Francisco 49ers. Obviously a Hall of Fame type player. He's inducted actually this past year in 2021. Hall of Fame player, really good broadcaster. He worked so well with Kevin Burkhardt. Obviously, if you're a baseball fan, you're very familiar with Kevin Burkhardt because he does baseball too, and I think he does a very good job. But he and John Lynch were my favorite combination on football broadcasts for Fox at least, and I didn't like seeing him go. The same thing too. I love Buck Showalter in the studio, whether it's MLB Tonight or wherever those shows they have. On MLB Network, whatever, I forgot the programs they have, but he is really good. His commentary is really good about a lot of things. I respect his knowledge. And so, let's see how he reassimilates himself to the life of being a manager. And it can be tough at that age to come back. You see, it doesn't always work out for guys who are that old. But, in cases like Tony La Russa, it does work out. And he had a lot of success this year. And I didn't necessarily think he would have a lot of success. So let's see. Obviously, building a connection to the players is important. But I think with Luis Rojas, that was a big point of contention is, do you want a guy who is too friendly or the players like him too much? I don't think that was necessarily the problem with Luis Rojas, excuse me. I don't necessarily think that was the issue with Rojas, but this is a bit more towards the authoritarian, but a bit more of an old school, manager, a guy who's been around the block for a while and a respected guy. And I think with the cats they have in that locker room, obviously DeGrom, and they got Scherzer now, and Lindor and Jeff McNeil. I mean, it's going to be a group of personalities, but I think Buck is equipped to work with them. It's going to be interesting to see how much input the front office has and the lean on analytics, and also how Buck Showalter factors in with that kind of stuff too. And it feels like now more than ever that guys are just being handed the lineup card, right? We'll see if that's going to be the kind of the theme moving forward, or is that going to be a situation, where there is some contention? It always seems like there is some with the Mets, consternation, contention, whatever you want to call it. But we'll have to see. On its face, I like the hire. I cover college football. In addition, I cover college sports in general. In addition to doing baseball, Locked On Big 12 podcast, check that out. But Danny Cannell always jokes from CBS Sports and Cover 3 and Sirius. He always jokes, I give every hire a C+ because nobody knows if it's going to work out. So there you go. Start off, I'm going to take that tact and give it a C+. We really don't know how it's going to work out until things play out, but I am curious to see. So Buck Showalter, obviously an acclaimed manager, now enters the fold in the National League East. And it just makes there is a really interesting group of managers now, because you've obviously got Don Mattingly with the Marlins, great player, championship type player, obviously, and now has moved on into his coaching career. And I think a lot of people think he's done a good job so far as a manager with the Marlins. You also, you look at the Nationals with Dave Martinez, very interesting there, obviously world champion manager. You also see Brian Snitker, now a new world championship manager during his time. So you see that kind of coming in as well. Joe Girardi, obviously a manager who has gone, to great lengths in his day, and he is well respected in the baseball community, especially as a manager, and had that world championship back in 2009, but now trying to reach those heights once again with the Phillies. So look across, with Showalter now and Martinez and, with Joe Girardi and Don Mattingly and Brian Snitker. Very eclectic group of managers, and also not a lot of youth. Like it's a relatively older group of managers, right? Brian Snitker is not not a young guy. Obviously, Joe Girardi is now, I believe, up in his 50s or 60s. I think he's in his 50s, 57, right? Brian Snitker is 66. Buck Showalter, as I mentioned, he is in his 60s as well. Dave Martinez is younger-ish. Don Mattingly, I believe he is in his 50s. If he's not 60 yet, he's just turned 60 years old. So bit of an older group in terms of managers, guys who've been around the block, but a lot of experience as well. So obviously the big talking point here, Buck Showalter hired as the Mets manager. All right, quick break here coming up. When we come back, we'll take a look at some of those pitchers who are in the back end of the Nats rotation this year. But first, word from our sponsors. Today's show is brought to you by Built Bar. Go to Built.com today. That's Built.com to check out all of the delicious Built Bars available during this holiday season. You should grab some. They're delicious. They taste like a candy bar, even better than a candy bar sometimes, and also much better for you than a candy bar. Delicious and healthy. They've got flavors right now like raspberry, mint brownie, cherry, double chocolate, cookies and cream, peanut butter brownie. All of those right now are available. So if you go to Built.com today, it's Built.com. Use the promo code LOCKED15, LOCKED 15 LOCKED15. You'll receive a 15% off discount right now. So go to Built.com. Check out their Built Go, their Built Boost, in addition to their Built Bars. And once again, use that promo code LOCKED15 today at built.com. All right, so the next part of today's show, let's look at some of those guys that factored into the back part of the Nationals rotation. Really, not even the back part. I mean, there really wasn't a set, established order of things last year. We thought there would be, right? To start off last season, the big three was back. Scherzer, Patrick Corbin, Strasburg, all there, all rearing, all ready to go. They added John Lester, a move that I was not very fond of at the time. There's your four. So the conversation was, hey, who would be fifth? Austin Voth really struggled back in 2020, and I know it was a weird season, but not impressive enough, in my opinion. Quality enough, not even impressive. He lacked impressiveness. Not enough quality there to justify his spot. So it came down to Joe Ross and Eric Fetty, in my opinion, battling it out for that final spot. It felt like Ross got the nod, and then, the injuries began to kick in, and Joe Ross and Eric Fetty obviously both becoming full-time parts of the Nationals starting rotation. I talked about Fetty on the last show, so if you want to hear that, you can go back and look. But Joe Ross, to me, I really enjoyed Joe Ross's last season. I thought he had a lot of strong starts, and for him, one more year of arbitration, becomes a free agent now in 2023, opted out of that 2020 season, so it bumped things back for him just a little bit. And I know he's coming off the injury. I might have accidentally in the last few podcasts said, surgery, whatever. This was not a situation where he had surgery, right? If you remember, he gets hurt in about mid-August, I think the 17th, in that area. Is where they decided to shut him down for the rest of the year. But the hope was that they avoided surgery, and we all believe that's the case unless some secret surgery has occurred. That's obviously a big factor kind of weighing over this entire situation about whether or not he can repeat performances. But he had a really strong year. And for him, I know, once again, it was cut short, but 20 games pitched, 19 starts, which is tied for the most of his career back in 2016. He made 19. Now, he had a 5-9 record, but we all know that's not how you measure things, right? I mean, he had a 4.17 ERA last year and threw 108 innings. So we know how misleading, the wins and the losses are, so we're not going to pay too much attention to that. But it got off to a decent start. He had a nice April. May was very difficult for him. It has 6 ERA in the 27 innings he pitched there. But June really settled down for him. Not settled down. I mean, it was immensely effective. The Nationals in games he pitched that month were 3-2, and he pitched 5 games in the month of June, 3-2 on the month. But I was at the performance that he had, this best game I thought he pitched all season. June 13th was a Sunday where he shut out the Giants. 8 innings, 5 hits, 9 Ks. He was really effective, 108 pitches. And I was there with my grandfather, and I was there with my father as well. Dad's a Nats fan, he enjoys the Natitudes, but really, he doesn't react a ton to a lot of sports, and even live. Sometimes, he just kind of sits there and enjoys the game and watches it. And my granddad, he doesn't watch a ton of baseball, actually stopped watching after the strike in the 90s. Both of them gave Joe Ross a standing ovation as he came off that day. And just to kind of impress them, two bystanders who don't really, watch a ton. My dad watches a decent amount. But just to be that impressive, to get those standing ovations, and the crowd was giving him that too. We know what he's capable of. Once again, 32 innings pitched, 32 1/3, 1.95 ERA, and had a really strong month. Had one tough outing against the Mets, but still pitched was very effective. Then had a sub-4 ERA in 3 starts in July, and was banged up, missed some time there in July. Then came back in August, made the 2 starts, really small sample size, but was injured. So he ended the season 5-9 with a 4.17 ERA. And this just kind of leads you, to think, hey, look, this is a guy that can hopefully eat some innings for the Nationals next year, but also a decent performer. This is a middle to the back of rotation guy that is now proven, he's had some ups and downs throughout his career, but last year at the age of 28, turned 28 during the season, he is in a position now where he's in a good age moving forward. I think the Nationals should look at maybe signing him up for a few more years. Now, obviously, they've got to wait to see the injury things, but if he continues on this track and is just a solid guy, I think it's worth it because the Nationals know they need dependable starting pitching. There's no guarantee that Strasburg is going to deliver that, and he is under contract. Patrick Corbin, under contract, but performance has been slipping. Now, consistent with the innings, he's been very, very consistent with pitching a lot. That's Patrick Corbin, but performances not been there. We talked about that in the last show. But Joe Ross, hopefully he can be consistent with the amount of time he gives them. In that form last year, it just really seemed like he was in control, in command of his stuff for a majority of the season. And really, I enjoyed watching him, use that fastball, move it around. It was effective. It felt like he had good control of his pitches last year in a way that we had not seen in the past. I think this was a guy, and we talked about this a good amount last season as well, actually benefited from the time off. The time off, deciding not to play, I thought that could have been potentially disastrous for a guy like him coming up at the end of his arbitration cycle, needing to hit the free agency market, not really being too proven. Obviously had the good years 15 and 16, but not recreating that very often, right? Not putting that out consistently. Thought he needed 2020 to show people that what kind of pitcher he was. I know he was part of the World Series winning team in 2019, but it's not like he pitched extremely well for a majority of that season. I thought he needed to bounce back in 2020, didn't play, and came back, like we talked about, very effective in 2021. And, the mixture of pitches, this is a guy that does come at you with 4 pitches, and he uses all 4, right? There's a lot of pitchers in the Nationals rotation that we've talked about that not using their pitches enough. Well, primarily a sinker guy, but uses the slider, uses the fastball, and then does throw the changeup enough. Not at 6% is not a lot, but really, he's got the 3 primaries that he's throwing and primary sinker, but he's using all 4. He is mixing all 4 in there, and all 4 were effective. Now, the sinker, that primary pitch last year, the slider was really good. Teams hit 194 off the slider last year. Teams only hit 220 off the fastball. They did have success against the changeup. And then sinker teams are hitting 266 off that. So as a primary pitch, he had good command. He was doing a good job last year with that sinker pitch. And I think, obviously, if he can come back and keep refining those pitches, keep, using them as effectively as we saw them, and obviously that fastball velocity up there in the 90s, he can heat that thing up a little bit. So if he continues on this track, I like the situation that Joe Ross is going to be in. And once again, that sinker is not a crazy fast pitch, but he's up there mid-90s, averaging about 93.5 miles an hour on that pitch. So he's a guy that's got a good mix of pitches, and we'll see. The curveball did make an appearance for him back in 2019. It's the only time we've seen it. I'm not sure we're going to see that again, but I think he's got material. I think those 4 pitches will be enough. Health for him is going to be the big question moving forward. But look, I think we're at a point where we should maybe be talking about Joe Ross as an option for the Nationals in the future, just kind of locking a guy up like that for a couple years, maybe 3 years, and somebody that you feel like is dependable to give you innings. Now, maybe you feel like he hasn't done it enough consistently in back-to-back seasons. Maybe the injury changes a lot of that. That's totally fine. I think it's an option the Nationals should begin to look into as he is in the last year of arbitration. But I think it's something the Nationals need to look at, something they can take advantage of. I think they will take advantage of that last year of arbitration. But once again, I think it's an option they need to begin to consider for the future. All right, one more break. Let you all know today's show is brought to you by our friends at betonline.ag. BetOnline is the best place to get in on the action. today for anything. You know, if you want to bet on basketball, football, NHL, NBA, if you want to look at some next season's World Series odds, they've got that going on. So go to betonline.ag today. When you go there, sign up using the promo code LOCKEDON when you deposit, and they'll give you a 50% deposit bonus. If you deposit $100, they give you an extra $50 to play with today at betonline.ag. Once again, promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, locked on, and they've got everything. I mean, Vegas casino games, props, NBA odds, bowl odds right now for college. So they got it all going on. Once again, betonline.ag is the spot. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, that will be it for today's show. We have got a crossover with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres coming up later on in the week. It's going to happen tomorrow, so I'll have that up on YouTube as well as in your podcast feeds. Also going to look at some more guys, Paulo Espino and also Josh Rogers. Check in with those fellas and talk about really, what their future could be with the Nationals. Short term, obviously long term, we'll talk about that too. We'll do that. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at @LO_Nationals. You can follow me at @JoshNeighbors_ as well. Find us on YouTube. Just find Locked On Nationals. You can find it there. And also Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you guys get your podcasts. All right, until next time, my friends, as always, especially right now, stay safe.